All right, so we're going to finish up our kind of like background review of things you probably learned a couple years ago or maybe last year with the Survival Guide Part 2. Okay, so starting Monday, that will be the actual first section in our book, and next Friday will be our first test in this class. All right, so first thing we want to look at is how do we determine if a number is greater than or less than another number? With positive numbers, it's pretty easy. Most people can do that. But sometimes with negatives, people get tripped up. They're like, wait, -8 and -5, which one is bigger? Is -8 bigger? Because it's like 8 is a bigger number than 5, but it's negative. So we're going to just try to make sure kind of people understand that. So on your guided notes, you guys should have a spot right below the two black arrows. And the first one, on the left, you can put down if a number is to the left of another number, then it is smaller. So if you look at a number on the number line, and it is to the left of another number, then it's small. So now that you can see what I wrote in that one, anyone have an idea what's going to be on the other line below the arrow on the right? If a number is to the left of another number, it is smaller. Yep, Lexi, what do you think? Right, if a number is to the right of another number, then it is larger. It's bigger. Right, so we'll practice a few examples, just kind of figuring out if something is larger or something is smaller. Now, there's symbols that we use to describe when something is larger, smaller, things like that. So I think before we even do the example, let's go over the 4 symbols and just make sure people know which one is which. Okay, and I know there's not a spot for this on your guided notes, but if you don't know the names of these symbols, you could just write it like off to the side, because that's basically where I'm going to put it right now. So this symbol. Anybody tell me what that symbol is called? Yep.
Greater than?
We're going to use that one for another symbol.
Okay.
But this one, that one's not the greater than. Which one is that? About, what symbol is that? Not sure? You want to help her out? What symbol is that one? Yep, that one?
Less than.
That's less than. Okay, so that's your less than symbol. How about when I put a line under it? What's it called when I, well, wait, how do you say it now?
Less than or equal to.
Right, it's still less than, but now it's less than or equal to. Less than or equal to. All right. How about that one? It's pointing to the right. Yes, Alex?
Greater.
That's your greater than. Greater than. And that one. You put the line under it. Yep.
Equal to or greater than.
Yep. So that's greater than or equal to. So the way I remember that this top one is the less than is if you took an L and then you kind of bent it in, like took that side and bent it down, it would look more like that. Bend that in. So the symbol that looks more like an L is the less than. All right, this one doesn't really look like an L at all. Right, different ways you can remember it, but however However you can remember it, that's the best way that works for you. Yeah. Yeah, just saying. All right, so we're going to look at some examples and figure out if a number is less than or greater than. So we're going to use one of these two symbols. Let's start with that. So on your notes, did I write down the numbers on your guided notes? Okay, so you guys need to write down -5 and -2. And I want to fill in one of those two symbols. Is -5 greater than -2? Or is -5 less than? And if you're not sure, think of a number line. Put 0 like here, -1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Imagine where these would be. -5 would be over here. -2 would be over there. And remember what we said. If a number is to the left, it's smaller. So is -5 greater than -2 or less than? Joseph?
Less than.
Yeah, that's less than. -5 is smaller than -2 because -5 is to the left of it. Any question on that? All right. The next one, B, says 4.5 and -6. What symbol is going to go between them this time? Is 4.5 greater than -6 or less than? Yes, Abby?
Greater.
Yeah, that's greater. A positive number is always bigger than a negative number. So I'm putting in the greater than symbol. 4.5 is greater than -6. Any question on it? All right. A little tricky because they're negative and they're pretty close. -5.3 and -5.4. And if you think of it kind of on a number line, -5.3 would be like right there. -5.4 would be a little bit more to the left. Okay, so this would be -5.3. That's -5.4. What symbol should go between them this time? Yeah, Lexi? Which one? Greater than, yeah. -5.3 is to the right of -5.4, just a little bit. So -5.3 is bigger than -5.4. Any questions on that? All right. So the next thing, talking about what it means for a number to be the opposite. Do you guys already have that part written on your notes? Numbers are opposites if they are the same distance. Okay, so you already have that. So if we have a number and you want to make it the opposite, all you have to do is put a little dash in front of it. Right? And when you're using a calculator, it is important. Sometimes there's a symbol for subtraction, and sometimes there's a symbol for a dash. So on this calculator, there's a button at the bottom, below the 3, that looks like a dash. And there's also another button on the right-hand side that looks like a dash. If I press both of them, you can see that they're a little different. They're not quite the same. Well, one of them is a subtraction sign, and one of them is the dash that makes something negative. When you're using a calculator, depending on the calculator you use, you have to make sure you use the right one. Some calculators are different than others. On this calculator, that first symbol is the dash. That's the one I'm talking about. The second symbol is if you wanted to do a subtraction problem. And if I use the wrong one, like let's say I meant to type in -6, and I do the subtraction symbol with a 6, it's going to think I want to do subtraction. So it tries to take another number and subtract 6 from it. But that's not at all what I meant. I just meant to put in a -6. So I use the little dash, and I put in a 6, and that's how you could type it in. Right? When you guys start using the calculators, we'll check it out on those. If you have your own, that's fine. I also have some you can borrow if you need to, but I'll make sure you know how to do it on my calculators. All right. So example 2 says simplify each of the following. Let's start with that one. Example A says -1/2. So you could read that as the opposite of -1/2. So what would that be? What's the opposite of -1/2? Or you could say, what's -1/2? Same thing. Yes, Alex?
1/2.
1/2, yeah. That's going to be equal to 1/2. So when you have two negatives next to each other like that, they cancel out. We're going to see that in subtraction problems in a minute. How about example B? What's the opposite of 0? Or what is -0? Have I guess what that would be? Joe?
0.
It's just 0. 0 is the only number that is its own opposite. +0 and -0 are exactly the same thing. So in math, we would never write -0. If that comes up in a problem, we just simplify it to 0. And how about this one? It says negative, and then in parentheses, 7.8 minus 3.2. This kind of ties in what we did yesterday. What's the first thing you should always do if you follow PEMDAS? Yeah?
Anything in parentheses.
Anything in parentheses. Do you see something in the parentheses you could do, Maya?
7.8 minus 3.2.
Yeah, so let's just use our calculator. And let's type in 7.8 minus 3.2. And that gives me 4.6. All right, so that dash is still in front. But then inside the parentheses, we now have 4.6. All right, so we did what was inside the parentheses. So Maya told us to do 7.8 minus 3.2. So we got 4.6. But what does that dash mean in front again? It means negative, right? So I don't need to leave this in parentheses. If I was going to write that as a final answer, I would just put negative 4.6. I guess it's not wrong if you leave the parentheses, but you don't need them. And that's it. So any question on simplifying any of those examples we did under example 2? All right, so let's look at adding and subtracting. So what we're going to do is try to go through just some rules that help you when you have to add and subtract, especially when you have negatives. If you have a way that already works for you, that you can remember how to add and subtract negatives, that's fine. If you don't, and you get confused when you do it, maybe this will help. Okay, that's what this is for. So, let's say you have to do adding and subtracting, and both numbers are the same sign. Like you have a positive plus a positive, okay, or a negative plus a negative, right? The things that you're adding, both are the same, both positive or both negative. So under same sign, what you guys can write in is this. You combine the numbers together, and you keep the sign the same. If the original numbers had negatives, the final answer will have a negative. If the original numbers were both positive, then the final answer will have a positive. Right, while you're doing that, I'll do a quick example up above. Positive plus a positive gives you a positive. You started with two positives, you ended up with a positive. If you had a negative plus another negative, the way I think of it sometimes is I think of a negative as like you owe someone money or you're in debt, right? If you have negative $3 and then you add another negative $1, it's like you owe someone $3 and now you owe someone another $1 because it's negative. So now you owe them even more. I owe you $3, now I owe you one more, now I owe you $4. I started with a negative, I added another negative, very different than multiplying, that we'll do that after. But adding two negatives together gives you a negative. It's kind of an example of that. So that's with the same sign. Now if you have different signs, with different signs, you take the sign of the larger number. So this is like now you're going to add a positive number and a negative number. Well, which one is going to win out? Whichever one is bigger. So let's say you had a 4 plus negative 1. Which number is bigger there? Positive 4 or negative 1? Yeah.
Positive 4.
Positive 4, that's a bigger number. Think of it as a more powerful, right? The positive is gonna overpower the negative. There's more positive than there is negative here. So when you have different signs, you take the sign of the larger number. So it is gonna be a positive, and then we combine what we had, which is the 4 minus 1, and that's how we get a positive 3. Again, if you've got a good way for you that helps you to think of it, just do it the way you know. But if not, I'm trying to help you. Okay. All right. Let's try an example. See if I can make that so you guys can read it a little better. Negative 12 plus negative 19. So, are we adding things together that have the same sign or opposite signs? Yeah, same sign. We're adding a negative to a negative. Think about if you got like a negative person and then you got another negative person. Well, it's going to be even more negative. Okay? You're going to have more and more negativity now. So the final answer is going to have a negative. Anyone think they can tell me what it's going to be? When you add negative 12 and negative 19, Jordan?
Negative 31.
That's going to be a negative 31. And sometimes for people, like thinking about it in terms of money helps. Like if negative means I owe you money. If I owe you 12, plus I owe you 19 more, now I owe you 31. So for me, that's a negative because I owe you money. So I'm not gaining money. It's not a positive, it's a negative. I got to give you money. Negative 31. All right, this one. Negative 16 plus 12. Are we adding numbers with the same sign or different signs in this case? Yeah? Different. And if you think about it in terms of like which one is more powerful than the other, you have negative 16 and a positive 12. What's my final answer going to be? Positive or negative? Yeah? It's going to be a negative, right? Think if you had 16 people who were negative, and then you had 12 people that were positive. Well, there's still more negativity than there is positive people. So you have more negative than you did positive. So the final answer is still going to be a negative. And does anybody know what it's going to end up being? Yep.
-4.
It's going to be -4. Good. So -4. All right, let's try one more. This one has multiple things to add up. So remember what PEMDAS says. You go in order from left to right. And we'll do one at a time. So it's -8 plus -2 plus 4 plus -6. Let's start with just this part. Think about if you had 8 people that were positive and you had 2 people that were negative. There's more positivity, right? More people that are positive. So you are going to get a positive answer, but these 2 people that are negative are going to kind of bring the mood down a little bit because they're negative. So what do you think we're going to get when we do 8 combined with -2? Oh, so 6, yeah. So not quite as positive as we were before because we had 2 people that were negative, but it's still positive, 6. And we still have the rest of it. 6 plus 4 plus -6. Okay. Now, again, follow PEMDAS, go in order from left to right. Now we have this part we want to do. Caleb, what's 6 plus 4 going to give me? 10. So now we have 10 and -6. What are we going to get when you, just as a sign, a positive or a negative, when you take 10 and combine it with -6? If you had like 10 people that were positive, you put them in the same room with 6 people that are negative. You're going to have more positive people, or you're going to have more negative people? Yeah, Lexi? Yeah, you're going to have a positive amount, because there's more positive than there is negative. But this -6 is going to bring it down. It's not going to be quite as positive. It's going to bring it down to 4. And that's your final answer. Okay, any questions on that? All right, that's basically the first half. Okay. Let's try same kind of thing, okay, combining, but this time, okay, this is on the back, it's the first example right at the top. This time you have to evaluate. Sean, how many different letters do we have in this one? 2. So we have to fill in 2 things. How about, Mia, what are they telling me to fill in for X? 5. So we're going to take the 5. We're going to fill that in for X. Cadence, what's going to come right after the 5? Before that. So the y is going to be gone. You are going to change that to -8, but there's something before the y, the plus. So we copy down the plus sign, and now we're going to put the -8. And Hanukkah, when I solve that, is it going to end up being a positive answer or a negative answer? Well, think about like if you had 5 people that were positive, and you combine them with 8 people that are negative. Are there more positive people in that group or more negative people?
Negative.
More negative people. So you're going to end up with a negative answer. Anyone think they can tell me what it would be? Negative, yep. 3. So these positive people try to bring the mood up in the room a little bit, but there's not enough positive people to offset all the negative people. So it still ends up staying negative, just not as many negatives as you had before. The +5 brings it up a little bit. Okay, any question on that one? All right. Let's try example 5. Okay, this one has some subtraction in it, something that we might have seen earlier. We have 6 minus -9. What did we say earlier happens when you have a minus next to a minus like that? You're minusing a minus. Abby?
Turns into a positive.
Yeah, it turns into a positive. So this really turns into that. 6 plus 9. And Emily, if I add that up, 6 plus 9 is how much? 15, right? It's like you have 6 positive people plus 9 more positive people. Now you have even more positive people. Now you got 15 people that are all positive. 15. All right. What's the rule here for how we do addition and subtraction? What's the order that we always go in? I know it's PEMDAS, but it's all addition and subtraction. So, like, do I do 4 minus 1 first? Yep.
You move left to right.
You move left to right, and all you have is addition and subtraction. So let's start with that. Okay, 6, take away 9. Think about it. If you had $6 and you spend 9, well, we have a problem now. We're going to have less money than 0. So think about what kind of number. Yeah? That's going to be a -3. All right, so we've got -3. Still have the +4 and the -1. Now do this next. Just going in order from left to right. What's -3 plus 4 going to give me? If you get stuck, think about if you had 3 people in a room that were negative, and you combine it with 4 people that are positive. Think about, would you end up with more negative or more positive people, and then how many? Yeah?
1.
1. You end up with a +1. Still have that -1 at the end, and that's our last step. 1 minus 1. Megan, what's that going to give me?
0.
That's going to give me 0. Any question on that? All right, so no, we're going kind of quick, but I'm sure you guys have done all this kind of stuff before, but just kind of a refresher. All right, let's try and evaluate. This time with 3 variables, but we're only going to do one of this type. When they ask me to evaluate, what's the first thing I have to do? Before I can even start doing like addition, subtraction, multiplication, or whatever. First thing I have to do is, yeah, Natalie?
Replace the variables.
Yes, replace all the variables with what they tell you to replace. They'll always give you something to replace it with. Aiden, what am I replacing x with? -7. And what's going to come right after the -7? Nope, not a minus. All we're going to do is change those letters to what they tell us to. Everything else that they gave us is going to stay the same.
0.
So look up in the original problem, right? What did you just replace?
The x.
The x. What is after the x?
8 or y.
Oh, before the y.
Plus.
Plus. So we're going to copy that down. Right? Now, what are we replacing y with? Yeah, Evan?
8.
8. What's right after the 8?
Minus.
A minus. Now we have to plug in the z. What are we replacing the z with? Yes, Alex?
-9.
-9. All right. Now we go right in order from left to right. -7 plus 8. How about Brady? What's -7 plus 8 going to give me? 1. Yep. Good job. So 1. Now, look at what we've got here. We did this. Minus minus 9. What's going to happen when you do minus minus? Yes, Natalie?
To a positive.
It's going to change to a positive. So we end up with 1 plus 9, which Finnegan gives me how much?
10.
10. That's it. You get 10. Any questions on that? All right. Let's look at this one. The temperature rose from -3, it must be winter or something, right? -3 to +16. How much did it change? This is example 7. The temperature went from -3 to +16. How much of a change is that? Think about what operation do you use when you want to know the change between two things. Like let's say you had an 80 on a test and you redid it and got a 90. How would you figure out the change? I mean, I know it's 10 points, but how would you figure it out? Yep.
Division. No, not division, but thank you.
Yep. Subtraction. Anytime you want to figure out a change between two things, you subtract it. You subtract. So we're going to do some kind of subtraction. And we just have to make sure we get the order right. Okay? Because we want to make sure we get if it's positive or a negative. If we get it wrong, we're going to have the temperature going backwards. We want it to make sure that it increases. Okay? So let's say, just for an example with positive numbers, to make it simple, let's say you took a test, and originally you had an 80, and your new score was a 90. What order do you subtract them in to figure out how much your test score went up by? Yep.
The bigger number first. So 90.
Well, let's actually say even you had this. Would you still do the bigger number first? Think about it in terms of old or original and new. Which one would come first? Let's go back to the way we had it. If you wanted to figure out how much your score went up by. Yep.
Original.
So if we put original first and subtract, that means our score went down 10 points.
No, it varies.
So which one should come first? The new one. Whenever you want to find the change between two things, you always put the new one first. And then you put the original second. So think of these temperatures. What was our original temperature here in the morning? Yeah, what was the temperature? When you woke up, you look at the thermometer, it said the temperature was what?
-3.
This is the original. The new temperature, later in the day, was 16. So what are we going to subtract to find the temperature change? Yep.
16 minus 93.
Perfect. 16 minus -3. The new minus the original. And 16 minus -3 is going to give me how much? Yeah, Caleb? 19. Yep. So that's the change in the temperature. All right, so that pretty much covers adding and subtracting. So the last thing we're going to look at is multiplying and dividing. Okay, we'll see how much we get through. If we have like 5 minutes left at the end, we might just finish it on Monday. But we'll see. So you guys have a table on your guided notes, right? But it's not filled in.
Mm-hmm.
Just has equal signs. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a table for how you can figure out whether something should be positive or negative when you multiply or divide. This is totally different than what we just did with adding and subtracting. It's not the same. Okay? When you are multiplying and dividing, if you multiply a positive number times a negative number, you get a negative number. That's what that chart means. A positive times a negative is a negative. Let's put it like this. Anyone think they know the next one? What's a negative times a positive? Yeah, Joseph?
Positive?
Nope, not a positive. There'll only leaves one other option. Yeah.
Negative.
It is a negative. So when you multiply or divide, if one of them is positive and one of them is negative, it doesn't matter which one, either the first one or the second one. Positive times a negative always gives you a negative. How about a negative times a negative? Emily, what do you think? Negative times a negative.
Positive.
That's a positive. And the simplest case kind of numbers you first ever learn about, a positive number times a positive number. Yep.
Positive?
That's a positive. Okay, so that little chart will help you to figure out whether something should be a positive or a negative. Other than that, if the numbers are kind of big, we're just going to use a calculator. You don't have to worry about that one. All right, so let's look at this one. Okay, they have 8 divided by 4 times 20. Now, when I look at that, I see something right away that I could do and just make it a little simpler. Does anyone see something there that they wrote it more complicated than they really needed to? Yep. Abby?
Simplify a fraction.
Yeah, why don't we simplify? I see some division. What is 8 divided by 4? 2. 2 times 20. Liv, what kind of number is 2? Positive or negative?
Positive.
Positive. What kind of number is 20?
Positive.
So we have this case. Positive times a positive is going to give me a positive. And Caitlin, do you think, you tell me what's 2 times 20?
40.
40. Good. Okay. The next one, I don't even care what the number is right now. I just want to know, a negative times a negative. Is it going to be positive? Or is it going to be negative? Fit again?
Positive.
It's going to be a positive. All right? So let's type it in on our calculator and see what we get. So we've got negative 6.8. Negative is right there. Times negative 5. It does. It gives me a positive. That's positive 34. On homework, that's all you'd have to write. There's nothing else to show for work. Okay, question on that one? All right. Let's try division. Same rules. Same exact chart you just had up above. So you have a negative divided by a negative. What kind of number are you going to get when you do a negative divided by a negative? Yep.
A positive.
You're going to get a positive. Yep. So really, you could just think of this problem as 15 divided by 5. The negatives cancel each other out. And 15 divided by 5, yeah, it's 3. Very good. How about this one? It says negative 27 divided by positive 3. Are we going to get a negative for the final answer or a positive? Caleb?
You get a negative?
You're going to get a negative. So I'm going to put that down right away. And does anybody know 27 divided by 3? Yeah.
Negative 9.
It's going to be a negative 9. Good. Yeah, nice job. Any questions on that? So it's a little easier to figure out positives and negatives with multiplication and division. Now, I think you guys already have this filled out on your notes, right? Okay. So when we look at this, there are special things that do happen with 0. All right? Whenever you have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction, that's a bad thing. And the way I try to remember it is if you have a number and you divide by 0, it spells no. A number divided by 0 spells no, which means you can't do that. So 0 in the bottom of a fraction, we say that that is undefined. You can't do it. 0 in the top of the fraction is fine. You can put 0 in the top all day. You'll always get 0. Right? So these are just a few special cases that sometimes come up. So 0 in the bottom, thing spells no. You can't do it. 0 in the top, no problem. All right. Anybody know if you have, looking at this next part, a fraction like a over b, and you turn it into b over a? Does anybody know the name of what that's called when you flip a fraction? It begins with an R. Yeah? Good. Nice job. It's a reciprocal. So on your guided notes, I think you have everything filled in except the word reciprocal. So a reciprocal is when you take the top and the bottom number in a fraction and you exchange them. They just switch places. And the last thing we'll look at, I don't know if we'll get through all the examples, but we'll try at least one of them, is fractions. So fractions are probably the trickiest thing to work with when you have to do division. But the rule, and you guys already have that printed on your notes. Okay, the rule is when you have to divide fractions, keep, change, flip. People heard that before? You keep the top fraction the same, and you flip the bottom one, and you multiply. All right, so let me show you one example of that, and the rest of it we'll probably finish up on Monday. So 8/9 divided by -2/3. Another way you might see this problem written, 8/9 divided by -2/3. It's exactly the same thing. So let's read the directions. Keep the top the same. Can somebody tell me what fraction is in the top here? Yeah?
8/9.
8/9. Keep it exactly the same. So it says keep the top the same. Now it says multiply. So what am I going to do after this fraction? I'm going to put a dot. I'm going to multiply by something. What am I going to multiply by? Let's go back and look at the directions. Multiply by the reciprocal of the bottom. Here's the fraction that was in the bottom. Can someone tell me what's the reciprocal of that one? Yep.
-3/2.
Right. The negative, when you flip something, the negative doesn't go anywhere. It stays right there. But the 3 goes to the top, and the 2 goes to the bottom. Now, what I usually do is if I can reduce, you can reduce your fractions. Does anybody see a number that goes into both 2 and 8? Yeah.
2?
How many times does 2 go into 2?
Once.
Once. How about into 4? All right. Good job. It goes into 8 4 times. Sorry, I gave you the answer. So we just reduced it. How about the 9 and the -3? Does anybody see a number that goes into both of those? Yep. How many times does 3 go into 9? 3. And how many times does 3 go into 3? Once. So let's look what we're left with. 4 times -1. What's 4 times -1? Yeah. -4. And in the bottom, you're left with a 3 times 1. What's 3 times 1? Yes. Okay. 3. Good. And that's your answer. -4/3. So we probably had about 2 minutes left. I'm not gonna go through the last two. Save that worksheet. And we'll do those as a warm-up on Monday while I'm checking homework.
So we have homework this weekend?
Yeah, so the homework is on Schoology, and it's the Survival Guide Part 2. If you get a little stuck on the last couple questions, that's okay, because we didn't quite get to them, but we'll finish it up on Monday. Does anybody have a question on where to find the homework? If you didn't do Part 1, make sure you bring it. I'll still give you full credit. Normally it would be half credit. I'll give you full credit if you still bring Part 1 on Monday.